A few comments on what we've heard today, and then one last concluding remark. First observation, do not mess with Steve Tompkins' bullshit meter. But seriously, on the issue of cost has come up over and over again. I just want to add a little extra context to that. We did this report in part because the broader context of the revenue picture in the Commonwealth is one of very, very constrained revenues. Now, I go back with this issue a long time. I spent 8 years of my life working on the state budget, running the staff of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And this is really kind of uncharted territory for us. The Boston is going through a building boom. Unemployment is low. All the leading economic indicators are high, yet it is not reflected in state revenue. So if we are going to find the resources that we need, desperately need, to do the things that make more sense, we're going to have to do it within those, with a realistic view of those constraints. And that means looking at reinvestment, taking funds that are already going to something that essentially is counterproductive and supporting a failed policy. And this is, we're not blaming anybody. This is a failed policy that took 30 years and a bipartisan consensus to move the get tough policies. So we've got to reverse it, and we've got to realize those savings and then reinvest them. They're not going to come at a time like this, and I'm very concerned about an economic downturn. We have a very tiny stabilization fund relative to a $40 billion state budget. Put it in context, years ago when the state budget was 28, 30 billion, you had like a $3 billion stabilization fund. So it's the resources aren't there if we have an economic downturn. So it's a very important issue in addition to the fairness issues and everything else that we're dealing with. On CSG versus comprehensive reform, let's not make it a one way or the other kind of deal. There are plenty of good things in the CSG report. Those should move forward. To say we need to go further is not to criticize the CSG report. The CSG report was limited in scope when it started out. There was a consensus among what we call the Big Four, the governor, the speaker, the Senate president, and the chief, that they should limit their focus to the back end of the system. And they did, and they came up with some good ideas. We take the position that that limited scope is a problem because we believe that unless you address problems at the front end of the system in terms of bail and sentencing, as you heard today, unless we deal with conditions of confinement, which we didn't spend enough time on today, but is a problem, read the news reports of late, read the Globe story on suicide, read the Globe story, suicide at the county level, read the Globe story about the suicide of Aaron Hernandez in a maximum security, super maximum security facility. The riot at Susan Baranowski, which was initially reported to be the result of gang warfare, which in essence was over conditions of confinement. We have to deal with all of that, or the good work that we're going to do through the CSG recommendations on the back end will not move the needle. So we're not saying don't do it, we're saying do it plus. And that's the position that some leaders have taken. It's a point of departure for more comprehensive reforms. I also mention was made of the geography of incarceration. Another problem with the limited scope and another problem with the conversation we have about these issues is sometimes what gets lost is the fact that this failed policy falls disproportionately on communities of color. And there was a lot of talk today about incarceration rates. Let me just spend 2 seconds on that. We have a low incarceration rate, relatively speaking, to the rest of the country, as was pointed out by Wayne Budd. Our country is a great locker up of individuals. So we do better than most. Great. We're the smartest in the dumb class in that sense. When you take our rate of incarceration, that is an aggregate picture. It includes all sorts of urban data. It includes all sorts of suburban data in order to come to that conclusion that our rate is low. We learned this when we looked at the gateway cities 10 years ago. Massachusetts was leading the country into the knowledge economy. Everything was great. All indicators were up. We disaggregated Greater Boston, took Greater Boston out of the statewide picture, and all of a sudden you realize Springfield was like Flint, Michigan. That Fall River and New Bedford were in real trouble. That an urban policy was desperately needed to help those cities that weren't benefiting from the gravitational pull of economic development in Boston. You had to disaggregate the data to find that out. If you do the same thing on incarceration rates and limit it to urban communities, the incarceration rate, as you saw in Fields Corner, is off the charts. We can't lose sight of that. It can't come at the end of the discussion. It should be at the beginning, because that's not who we are as a Commonwealth, as the Chief Justice said. So I'm going to wrap up. This is something that we have been, I want to thank our co-chairs, thank all the panelists, all the people who worked on this, the Massing staff who killed themselves over the last couple of months to bring this about, Ben Foreman and Mike Widmer. This is not easy research to produce. It is very hard to find and then analyze that data. So thank you to everyone. We have been at this for 5 years. To those who lose heart that it takes so much time to turn this around, remember, as I said before, it took us 30 years to get here. We will not flip it overnight, but it is definitely worth staying in the fight, continuing the effort. The Criminal Justice Reform Coalition will do that with our partners, and we hope to get some progress in the current legislative session. We hope to get some progress out of the Sentencing Commission. We hope to get some progress out of various administrative reforms that can be done without legislative action. We can't do it without your help, but we're in this fight with you. Thank you for coming today.